So, hey, Zach, welcome to Monster Boss.
Thank you.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? You're the developer of the quite popular cult classic Siralim 1 and 2.
Yeah, I'm the only person working under Thylacine Studios. We outsource all of our graphics, sound, pretty much everything except for programming and design. Currently working on a new game called The Negative and another secret project on the side that I haven't really announced yet.
Oh, another secret project, too. I didn't even know about that. That's super interesting.
Yeah, I haven't really talked about it all yet, so it's a first here.
Okay, cool. So, I know that you have a subreddit, you have a Discord, you have a forum. We'll include all those links in the comments. It's really great to see your project succeeding. It's definitely one of my favorites to see as time goes by, and it has that monster collecting formula that I'm a big fan of, and everyone that's tuning into this will be. So I'm just curious, what were your favorite games as a kid, and what games inspired you?
Well, the number one game that inspired the Siralim games was called Dragon Warrior Monsters. And I don't know if you've played it before, but if you pick it up, you'll see the similarities immediately, even down to having, the monsters follow your character around. The graphics look pretty much just like it, stuff like that. So that's definitely the sole game that inspired what I've created so far. Aside from that, I guess I've played pretty much just about any RPG I can get my hands on. And you'll see small influences throughout the games with those two. Grim Dawn, Final Fantasy Tactics even. There's just small references and little things that I guess I've picked up over time that I'd like to add to my games as well.
Cool. So are you a Dragon Warrior Monsters 1 guy or a Monsters 2 guy? I'm a 2 guy.
I'm a 2 guy also. In fact, the Siralim games are actually based on Dragon Warrior Monsters 2's Endgame, which is with the whole key system.
Oh, man, yeah.
I guess I should explain that in case there are people who haven't played it.
Sure.
Basically, after you beat the story in Dragon Warrior Monsters 2, you start finding these magic keys, and you use these keys to travel to randomly generated levels. And they have randomized enemies, random items, random events, stuff like that. And I found that when I was playing Dragon Warrior Monsters 2, I was rushing through the story just to get to this endgame. That was really the most fun part of it for me. You could start breeding your monsters, and the game really opened up after that. So I wanted to create a game that kind of distills it and gets rid of all the fluff in the beginning and just gets right to the good stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the strongest things I think about the indie community is that we've grown up with these games. We've spent so much time thinking about them before we ever write a line of code. So we really distill the raw component that we want to build the game on, which you've clearly done, and anyone listening could clearly hear your passion towards these Dragon Quest Monsters games in the end game. So that's really fantastic. I love to see that.
Well, thank you.
So, what other media, stories, TV shows, folklore, movies, works of fiction inspired you and helped shape your unique style with game development, but with monster development as well? Your own tastes. I'm sure you've reached a point where you've made a monster, you designed a mechanic that just felt like, damn, that's exactly what I like. So tell us a little bit about your inspirations and what made your personal style and flavor.
As far as other media is concerned, for Siralim 1 and 2, there wasn't really a lot of influence from, books and TV shows or anything like that. But in The Negative, you'll see a lot more influence from, I guess, outside sources. I've been reading a lot more books lately. Stuff from Brandon Sanderson. He wrote Mistborn and the Stormlight Archive, which I've been reading a lot of, and those have definitely helped out a bit. Even down to reading about things like psychology, philosophy, stuff like that. You'll see a lot of elements of that in The Negative. I guess other than that, there's really not a whole lot going on outside other than just influence from other video games.
Sure, cool. I noticed that it has a little bit of a spooky, sort of horror-oriented edge to it, which I'm a big fan of as well myself. For me, it doesn't come necessarily from horror movies or scary movies, but definitely that style, that energy into it. So I definitely appreciate that. Tell us about your mindset when you sit down to create a monster. Do you start with drawings or pixel art? What do you do to get in the right mindset, get inside the monster? As you're sketching it out, as you're drawing it, as you're designing it. What's going through your head in those moments?
Well, I guess the first step is I ended up biting off a little more than I could chew with Siralim and Siralim 2. There's, I think, 600 monsters in Siralim 2. So at that point, you're pretty much just trying as hard as you can to think of an idea in terms of looks. So I'll either come up with an idea in my head, or the graphics artist who we're working with will come up with an idea on his own. And you'll take a look at it and make any visual adjustments as needed. And after that, it's more about, I guess, in terms of designing how the monster plays in terms of skills and things like that. It's more about looking at, what should this guy do? What does he look like he does? If he's really strong and kind of dumb looking, then he'll cause a lot of damage, but, might not be very good at casting spells. Or, this guy looks really angry. He should do something with like a berserk type of idea. So it pretty much boils down to that. And when there are so many monsters in the game, you can pretty much guarantee that at some point you're going to hit every archetype that a game should have anyway.
So do you start, if you were to design a monster yourself, one that came from you as the lead developer, would you start with drawings or with pixel art or just even a concept?
It's kind of tough for me because I am so bad at drawing. It's not even funny. So I really do rely on, I guess, either an idea I have for how something should look or whatever the graphics artist comes up with. Or even, the negative, the foremost concept is the idea of a plague doctor. And for some reason, I saw a plague doctor, I don't know, it was on some like magazine or ad or something, and I got really excited about it. So I decided to design the entire game around that concept. So it really comes from pretty much anywhere at random. There's really no one definitive source.
Cool. So I guess it's really key in your situation to have a monster artist, a graphic designer that really you jive with well.
Yes, definitely.
So, out of all the monsters in Siralim 2, in the negative, anything on the horizon, what would be your favorite monster that you've ever made? Something you go back to, something, you're really proud
of? That's a pretty easy one. In Siralim 2, there are these gods and goddesses that you'll encounter. There's 15 in total. There's like a god of frost, a god of poison, stuff like that. But my favorite by far is called Torin, who is the god of anger. And he's not angry in a stereotypical sense. He's kind of over the top angry to the point where he's swearing at the player and just, it's so over the top. It was like a lot of fun to write his dialogue and stuff. And later on in the game, you can actually treat him kind of as a monster that you can add to your team. And even his skill is very profane, I guess. I don't want to get into what the skill is called on here because it requires a great deal of swearing. But that was by far my favorite monster, and you'll definitely see more of him in the future in our secret project.
Cool. Well, I'm definitely looking forward to that, and I'm sure other people listening are. All right. So, you've touched on the negative a few times, but give us an idea, just give us a brief description of what it's all about. What's the core idea behind the negative?
So, something that really isn't explored a whole lot in any game really is like the concept of having just negative emotions, depression, rage, jealousy, grief, things like that. And I'm really taking it to the extreme in that the game world pretty much takes place in the player's own head. And you're traversing through this endless world. It's randomly generated, infinite in every direction. Has randomly generated towns, randomly generated everything, really. And you're going through each of these emotions. There's 7 in total. And each environment focuses on a different emotion. For example, there's one based on depression, which is going to have like a lot of snow and kind of like a Dark Souls feel to it. The one about rage, it's going to be like this big battlefield. So it's a very emotional, evocative game, very dark and gothic. It's kind of like Siralim meets Dark Souls, if that makes sense. It's not as lighthearted and goofy like Siralim is.
Cool. So, I suppose you've learned so much about the RNG side of things, randomly generating things in roguelike from your time with Siralim, and it really sounds like you're starting to concentrate that into more of your personal brand of this random generation and how you incorporate that into gameplay. And you're really taking it to the next level with the negative?
Yeah, I want to be a little bit more careful about it too at the same time, though, because I feel like Siralim could kind of be a little too random at times. So I'm trying to kind of tame it down and control it a bit so that the levels don't look quite as random. They look a little more polished and more well put together. So it's a challenge, but it's something I definitely want to do for this game.
Zack, you mentioned that you'd be interested in doing a little giveaway.
Yes.
Do you want to fill us in on that? It'll be anyone that comments or retweets will be entered into the draw.
We're talking about giving away a copy of Siralim and Siralim 2, and that'll be for Steam.
Cool.
So that's open to anyone. That means it's for Windows, Mac, or Linux, your choice.
All right, cool. And that's super generous for you to offer. I can't wait to see who wins that and when we draw the name. So we have you have a big community, so we have a few questions from your Discord, from your subreddit, from Twitter, and we'll just go through those now. So Obscure Animal asks, what inspired the art style you chose? Is pixel art your favorite medium?
I guess the reason why I originally went with pixel art is just because that's what Dragon Warrior Monsters used, and I wanted the game to look exactly like that game. So it kind of naturally flowed that way. As of now, though, I'm not trying to really copy any specific art style, so you'll see with the negative it's a lot more, different than anything I've made before. I don't really go toward a specific art style. I think certain art styles work better for certain games. I am trying to avoid it looking too much like a mobile game, though, so I do like the pixel style that we have going for the negative right now.
It looks really serious. It looks really detailed. I don't think you come up looking like a mobile game in a negative way whatsoever. I definitely respect your use of pixel art and choosing the best medium for the project and choosing great style.
Thank you very much.
Oh, no problem. You definitely deserve it. FDFAS9. I wouldn't dare try to pronounce that, but he asks, what's the inspiration on items and spells?
For items, I'll be completely honest, I had a quantity over quality approach for items in the first game. I wanted to pack any item I could possibly think of into the game just to give people more stuff to do. Whereas in Siralim 2, you'll notice I kind of trimmed it back a little bit and tried not to make it so item heavy, which I ended up completely failing to do. There's still tens of thousands of items to find. But I guess I want all the items to be able to work together synergistically, and I had to cut out a lot of fluff during development. And there's a lot of stuff that you'll see cut out for a future game as well. In Siralim 2, we have runes, which I don't like how those turned out at all. They don't really add a lot to gameplay. Sigils don't really add a lot to gameplay. So that was actually kind of a mistake on my part. As far as spells go, again, I just like to create things that might be fun to play with. If you're familiar with Hearthstone, I actually really like how they create cards in that game that anything can happen. So that's kind of the direction I went with spells. Let players be creative with them instead of me forcing them to play a certain way.
Cool. And your type of game definitely lends itself to people that want to maybe make their own sort of flavor of their play style because of how your game is set up. So that's definitely awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Flaking Napstitch asks, how do you manage to support so many platforms at launch? Now, this is a question I'm interested in a lot myself as well, because it's more on the game dev side of things.
Mm-hmm. So we use Game Maker as our engine, which basically you create a game and then you can export it for Windows, Mac, Linux, Android, iOS, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and there's a few others, but I don't really use those. And it really is just as simple as hitting the Windows versus the Android button, and out pops a game. The only thing you really have to keep in mind is that you have to adapt mobile controls for mobile devices, gamepad stuff for PlayStation, and then each platform has its own specific rules. Like PlayStation is very strict about what you can call certain buttons. You can't call it X, it has to be called X button, stuff like that. So it takes a little bit of fine tuning to get everything working. But for the most part, you're talking a couple extra weeks of work per platform.
Wow, I didn't know that about the PlayStation bot names. That's very interesting. Okay, so we got another question from Discord here. What would you ever consider online multiplayer in your games?
If I were to make a game with online multiplayer, the game would probably be centered around it. It wouldn't really be so much of an afterthought, which is what would happen if I added it to Siralim right now. Because, balance is a huge, huge issue. And in order to make a game have online components, you really have to design it from the start with that in mind. And it's really just too late for that now for Siralim and Siralim 2. So I probably won't make anything like that for now.
I get what you mean. With online, there's so much to it, and with these types of games, I think people are attracted that play casually, and there's people that are attracted that want to min-max every stat. So I definitely respect your point of view on that one. Story Gamer 88 asks, how did you get into game development? Did you go to college, and if so, what did you study? What were you working on before you became a full-time game developer?
I started out just kind of designing my own websites and trying to make that work. I created some bots for some massively multiplayer online role-playing games like World of Warcraft, Runes of Magic, stuff like that. And it turns out that these bots actually are the reverse of designing a game. Because with a bot, which for those who don't know, it's software that plays these games for you while you're away from your computer. But in order for something to play a game, it has to know how to play it. So it's almost like reverse engineering game design in order to make these.
Wow.
So I guess that actually made game development a little bit easier for me to get into. As far as college education goes, I ended up getting a master's degree in business, and then I decided I didn't really want to do anything with that, so I started pursuing a master's degree in computer science, and about halfway through that, Siralim started to take off and do pretty well, so I ended up just kind of stopping there, and now I just work on this full time.
Wow, pretty impressive, to go from getting master's degrees to running your game development studio full time. As a hobbyist, that's super inspirational for me.
Good, thank you.
Story Gamer 88 and Dan Leonard asked, what are the chances for a Siralim 3 in the future?
Pretty good.
Pretty good?
Yeah.
I think that might have been a confirmation a lot of people were waiting for, or a lot of people were very excited to hear.
Yeah, originally I announced that wasn't going to happen because in my eyes at the time, I thought, I'll never be able to do better than this. But I still kind of play the game every now and then, and I've started to see all these things that I can add and improve and cut out and make a better game in the end. And I guess I do have enough to work with now to where Siralim 3 is definitely a possibility in the future.
All right, awesome. That's cool. That's very good news for sure. Now, I'm going to throw you one off-the-wall question. And what is your favorite donut?
Lemon.
Lemon. Okay. All right. Lemon's a pretty good choice. That tells me you're a really unique person. I have a whole horoscope about depending on your donut choice. So I'm going to ask everyone that and tell them something really profound about themselves. So good to know you're a lemon guy.
Great.
All right. So anyone that is commenting on this or sharing it on Twitter, you'll be entered in the draw. We'll draw 1 week from when the video goes up, which will be this Tuesday. And we'll contact the winners, and you'll win a copy of Siralim 1 or Siralim 2. Thanks to Zack, super generous of him to offer. Zack, thanks so much for joining us today. We really loved having you on here. You bring a great energy to it, and we're really excited about having you as our first interview guest.
Sure, I really appreciate it. It's been fun.
All right, cool. Well, keep us in the loop. Keep us updated. Monster Group on Twitter. We want to share any new updates you have, any announcements. So definitely keep us in the loop.
Will do.
Thanks for your time, Zack.
All right, thank you.